Alright, so this is a movie that doesn't need an introduction. It doesn't need build-up. It is only a small overstatement to say that everyone has been looking forward to Avengers: Infinity War. The Marvel Cinematic Universe movies from Marvel Studios, a subsidiary of Disney, have become such a major part of pop culture in the last 10 years that even if you're not someone who keeps up with all of them, you're probably someone who has at least seen many of them, and at least knows several people who have a vested interest in this movie. This is the culmination of the first decade of Marvel Studios movies. It's one of those movies that I just can't talk about all that much, because if I talk about this movie for too long and I get too specific, I'm going to spoil something and ruin the experience for somebody. This is one of those movies where not even minor spoilers are okay, because it does bring so much together and it does resolve so much that a large chunk of the enjoyment for this movie comes from being surprised when it does surprise you. This movie, at its barest bones, is about the villain Thanos, who has been kind of looming over the MCU since the original Avengers, making his final push in his attempt to gather the 6 Infinity Stones. It is during the course of this movie that we also finally learn what he intends to do with them, which is in the trailers, but I'm still not even going to spoil that here, just in case there's someone out there who hasn't seen the trailers yet on purpose. There are 4 things that I want to talk about, and then I'm just going to move on and give you my rate. First of all, I want to talk about the action in this movie. This was directed by the Russo brothers. They've done other Marvel stuff before, and their action sequences always turn out spectacularly. The climax of the movie has some great individual fight scenes in it. There are some great person-on-person fight scenes in it, but at the end of the day, it was probably the least interesting fight we got. There was certainly interesting stuff in it, but the fight itself was certainly not all that interesting. The more interesting fight scenes came earlier. More personal, more individually high-stakes fight scenes that had more room to really open up and allow the Russos to get creative with the fight cinematography and choreography, and they were great. Action throughout this movie was consistently good, if not great. Characters made clever use of their enemies' weaknesses, their strengths, and the landscapes and the real estate around them in ways that you rarely see in movies like this, especially movies like this with so many characters to juggle and balance. And because this movie did bring together so many plot threads, which is the second thing I want to talk about, and did have to juggle so many characters and resolve so many things while still setting stuff up for the next few movies and then the second part of this movie coming in 1 year. The fact that it managed to squeeze so much interesting action in there and still, I think, do a really good job with those plot threads really says a lot. Because while some threads felt a little unexplored, underexplored, I guess you would say, and while some characters who have been main characters in past Marvel movies kind of became supporting or background characters here, simply due to the sheer size of the cast, I was still impressed by how well this movie took everything that it had to balance and balanced it well. Every plot thread was balanced well, not perfectly, but certainly very, very well. The movie was never hard to follow, the stakes were always clear, and they even introduced some plot threads and brought back some plot threads and explored some plot threads that I honestly didn't expect them to. In particular, during Thanos' search for one of the stones, they brought in an aspect of one of the past MCU movies, that's all I'll say, that I just didn't expect to see explored again. There has been a lot of talk about this movie leading up to it, because of course there has. As I said already, this is one of the most anticipated movies ever. There has been a lot of talk regarding who's gonna die. They called it Infinity War. And with everything which is coming together and culminating here, sticking war in the title doesn't seem quite so limp-wristed as including war in the title of Civil War, for example. This movie is so big that you really do expect it to feel like a war, and it does. And in war, people die. And again, I'm not going to get specific with who dies, but I will tell you that regardless of what you expect to happen in regards to this specifically, this movie will probably surprise you. And I think that was the most interesting thing, not just because it surprised me, but because my one major nitpick about this movie comes from this. This may be giving way too much, I hope it's not, but I have to say it. My one major gripe with this movie is that who they choose to kill off in the end ends up showing their hand. I now have a pretty good idea of how the next one is going to go. Not the next one like in sequence of all Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, but the next Avengers movie coming out next year. I have a pretty good idea how it's going to go now, and assuming that they don't surprise me again, that is kind of a bummer. And if you're interested in my thoughts in that regard, be sure to check back with the channel Tuesday, because I will have a theory video up exploring my ideas about the next movie in detail. Though keep in mind, that video does spoil the crap out of this movie. All of that said though, this handled the story so much better than I had hoped. It handled the characters so much better than I had hoped. Character interactions in this were fantastic. Everybody was in character. Everybody interacted the way I expected them to. It felt so natural. After all, we've been getting to know these characters, some of them for as much as 10 years. It had to feel natural. It had to feel like these were the people we've been getting to know all this time. And it did. It's not a perfect movie. I don't think it breaks grounds in terms of its character interactions, but the characters were still characterized excellently. Especially the villain. Thanos in this movie was not just some big hulking brute. The way that he is written and portrayed in this movie, he very well may be the best villain that Marvel has ever had in these movies. And yes, I am including Loki. So at the end of the day, as far as blockbusters go, I think this one was just as groundbreaking as the original Avengers, if not more, and deserves a solid 8 out of 10. If you have any emotional investment in these Marvel movies and you, for some reason, don't want to see this one, I would definitely rethink that. There are some moments in it that are certainly hard to watch, but it's worth it. But as per usual, guys, I'd like to know, what do you think of this movie if you have already seen it? And considering how many people have seen it at this point, you probably have. Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below or over on my Discord, link in the description, but in both places, keep it spoiler free, or in the latter case, if you go to my Discord, keep discussion of spoilers to my spoiler section, please. Either way though, this has been AJ22 and I will talk to you guys later.